and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that this is also what you see if you look like, for example, when you get into really advanced philosophy, for example, from an academic point, in the end you end up with mathematics, right?
You end up with
mathematics, logic.
Yeah. So, for example, even if you do, for example, linguistics, right? In the end, if you're writing a PhD in advanced linguistics, it's gonna be equations, right? It's gonna be algebra. So I think that this is true for everything, right? So even prompt engineering, sooner or later, when you really, really need the agent to perform something that is quite complex, you will need to turn into more structural prompting again.
Because this is so many angles. So if you start with the reflection on how has prompting evolved. We did programming, we left programming, and now we're getting back to programming like prompting. It's such a big topic, because when we say we can replace engineers and we can replace programmers, I've been trying to say that rhetoric is really dangerous, because we are augmenting the way we program. We're augmenting the roles that programmers have. Maybe we need less engineers as a consequence, but the way to look at the problem is not a replacement problem, it's an augmentation problem. So I think what you are saying is literally like, programming has never been more important.
No, and also going to the data science side of Bonnier News, for example, you will see, I see a lot of people who are prompting language models and are being very nice, saying, hello, can you help me with this? Thanks, and so on. Basically the same thing as thanking Google for the search results.
Do you say please when you write to?
No, nothing. I don't say hello. I just write exactly what I want, and never.
I feel a bit bad when I do that.
Yeah, and I never ask questions. I only give instructions, right? And if you look at, for example, for the data science side at Bonnier News, the prompting that takes place there is basically just very short but very clear instructions. Like we don't act as the language model actually is an entity. It's just a part of a process.
Yeah. Now we get into psychology of AI, which is actually a new field, I think. Potentially adding some kind of more emotional kind of statement, like, oh, I like you very much. Can you please provide it? Perhaps it could actually influence the interactions and the output of the model still, right?
Yeah. But it's a deeper, you touched on it, but I think it's a quite profound message that you slipped in here. We don't ask it questions, we instruct it. That is some unpacking around that. How we think about our agents and the way to use responsibly.
Yeah, but
these type of
it's a sequence model. Right, it's nothing else. It's a sequence model.
It's more than that. I think it's a bit weird to say it's just a sequence model. I mean, it's like saying it's just a statistics or a statistical parrot. Right. I think it's much more than that.
I don't agree.
Okay.
But I don't agree. I mean, one argument can be how humans act, for example. The thing here is, of course, that most people, I think there's multiple studies on this, most people don't know how they're going to end a sentence when they start speaking, right? So saying that basically language models are a sequence model, well, I could also argue for that, like the language center in the brain is also just a sequence model.
Yes. Yep. And that would be a bad description of the brain, wouldn't it? And then it would also, I would argue, be a bad description of an animal. This turns out into an interesting discussion.
This is going to be a great pod. I can hear it.
To disagree. It's also awesome. Well, with that, I'd like to welcome you both very much here to the AI After Work podcast. Let's start with Hans Hjelm. You are the product owner, right, in the data science team? Is
exactly.
That correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. At Bonnier News.
Yes.
And you're also something which I don't know what it is, but I think perhaps Henrik or Goran knows. You're a guitar player? What?
Krautrock.
Krautrock.
Yes. I have no idea what that is. But
it's Krautrock is rock music made originally in Germany in the 70s. So think of music that's like Kraftwerk, but played on electric guitars instead of synthesizers.
Cool.
Cool, very cool.
But you also have a PhD in computational linguistic from Stockholm University, like 15 years ago, right? Something. And,
that's
and you're
right.
also supervising another PhD student, a WASP PhD student.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm looking forward to hear more about shortly. But super cool. And before we get more into, perhaps you can describe a bit more. Who is really Hans Hjelm?
Sure. I started out trying to become a musician, actually. So I studied music for a few years. I moved to the US and I lived outside of Dallas, and I studied music for a few years and realized there were too many other guitar players that were much better than me. So I had to switch to something where I could make a living. And so I switched to the obvious choice, computational linguistics.
That's so obvious.
Next step.
Yeah. So I got my master's in computational linguistics in Gothenburg. And after that, I worked for a few years for some startups in Germany and moved back to Stockholm to do my PhD.
And what was your PhD about, if you just briefly try to describe it?
Yeah, so this was before deep learning, but my topic was ontology learning and cross-language ontology learning. So basically, I was looking at what we now call embeddings and trying to see, can I use the information in embeddings to create a taxonomy of words or terms? And what happens when I do that in Swedish compared to English, compared to French? So I looked at a lot of texts from the EU and tried to learn these semantic representations of words and terms, basically from that.
And this was before Word2Vec, I guess. So this is
exactly.
It was support vector machines, or
using support vector machines. Random indexing was a popular technique back then. Yeah.
Cool stuff.
How would you have, if you would have done your PhD today?
Good question.
What would be how would you reframe the question, and what techniques would you be looking into?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I mean, back then you had to program a lot of the basics yourself. So I was basically doing like singular value decomposition and all these mathematical exercises that you now get out of the box. So you could have just started from where I ended, pretty much, I would say.
Is computational linguistics still like the standard move for people, guitarists, or have that changed?
No, it's social media.
All right.
It's still the same.
Yeah, right.
Cool. But at some point you started at Bonnier News. How long ago was that?
I started in 2017.
17. Good. And if you were to describe your current role, what are you currently doing there?
Yeah. So I work as the product manager for a data science team. We are 5 developers in the team, and plus me. And we work with the whole organization. So we work, for example, with the advertising department, trying to create special segments for advertisers for different markets. So we have segments for the car industry, or for fashion, or for food, for example.
Cool.
We work with the newspaper delivery.
Really?
Yeah.
So we try to optimize like the number of newspapers that get delivered to each point of sales for each day.
How long do you think you will continue to deliver papers?
I think it will last longer than people think.
Okay.
Or when I started in 2017, people were saying, like, "Isn't this going to end soon?" But, yeah.
Actually, I went from digital back to a paper quite recently. Just because I wanted
It's the premium product.
the premium product on the weekend, right?
Yeah.
I only got the weekend product then.
Yeah, awesome. Let's get, there's a lot of topics there to get into, and how you work in Bonnier News and what they do, etc. But before that, I'd like to welcome here as well, Magnus Engström.
Thank you.
And you're the head of architecture and data, right?
Yeah, that's right. And at Bonnier News, before that I was head of data and some parts of the development team. Some of the development teams at Mitt Media was acquired by Bonnier News. So that's how I ended up. That's how I ended up at Bonnier News.
How long ago was that?
Oh, it's 2019, I think. Right. So I've been at Mitt Media for quite some time. I started off as a system developer, tech lead at Mitt Media first.
And was Mitt Media, you were working out of Gävle then too?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And you started as software engineer or software developer? And
Yeah, exactly. Well, I started off classical college dropout. I was actually aiming to be working with sports and like sports science, and then I quit that. Started as a web developer instead because I had time off during the summer, and then I just never went back to it. So that was my only time working or in the academic sector actually. Then I took some certificates and so on later on. So but basically that's how I started, and then I worked as a web developer and less web and more systems, and then that's the path. And then
data science somehow?
Well, data science, I don't know how much the term data science was actually a term back in like 2012, 13. But
It starts then, but it's not used very much in Sweden in 2012.
Yeah. Worked a lot with advertisement, a lot of optimization. I think that's something that me and Hans have in common, right?
I also worked a lot with ads. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that's a good start. I mean, it's huge data sets, and it's very close to the business side. Always, you kind of exactly know what the goal is, right? For example,
The objective function is quite clear.
Yeah.
And now you work as head of architecture and data. What does that mean?
Well, if we build things at Bonnier News that we have intention of scaling within Bonnier News, and Bonnier News is, I lost count, it's over 200 brands by now. So if we're going to scale things at Bonnier News, not always, but usually I'm involved, like from a central perspective then. And then actually, I think it's official today, or it was yesterday maybe.
Breaking news here.
Yeah. So we have kind of restructured a little bit at Bonnier News. So now we have a domain where we have the data science team, the Atom team working with like the agent layers at Bonnier News, and the Bonsai team, they're working with like smart journalistic tools, for example. And that is a domain now, and I'm domain lead for that. And together with me in like the leadership of that domain, also Hans. For example.
We need to dig into that one because there was so many exciting
agent layer and
decomposing how you frame this domain or structure it was very interesting, just what I heard.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Should we perhaps give a quick introduction to what Bonnier News is?
Yes, I think
you started to speak a bit about that. 200 brands.
Yes, I think that just we can start there. I don't think people knows what Bonnier News is. I didn't know when you flip it like that.
Well, Bonnier News is by the name, it's mostly news brands. It's not only news. There are some lifestyle brands and so on, and some other types of businesses within the Bonnier News company as well. But mostly it's like news brands. I think Bonnier News is, with quite a good margin, the largest publisher in Sweden. So for example, Expressen, Dagens Nyheter, Dagens Industri.
I am a customer.
Yeah. all the local news from Mitt Media and the local news from Gota Media and Hall Media. There's a lot of local news.
So the Bonnier News is the group that owns a lot of different companies or brands.
Yeah. And Bonnier Publications in Denmark, Hufvudstadsbladet in Finland, for example. And then there's a lot of other
these are more classical news.
Yeah.
But there are other types of brands. There are digital brands here as well, right?
Yeah, there's some purely digital brands, and some of those used to be magazines as well, and some are still magazines. But for example, with lifestyle brands, you have, for example, Teknikens Värld, Allt om mat. I mean, there's far above 200 brands.
So
Hans, did I miss anything?
Any major ones?
No. Major ones.
No.
But several of these brands are in fact known publications.
Yeah.
Like Teknikens Värld.
Yeah.
And how is it organized? Are you then having a set of centralized teams like the data science team, etc., that works across all these brands, or how does the organization look like?
Yeah. So more like we moved towards a more of a, I don't want to call it a centralized way, more like a collaborative way. Like we have a product domain, and within the product domain, for example, we have the different news products that are collected. We also have a commercial domain, and you will find two legs of that. It's like the advertising, the sales part, and then we have like the subscription, like the business domain, basically. And then we have like a central tech domain, for example, and there we have things like systems and tools and things that we see that will probably be used equally across all those domains. But then, of course, we have a huge part of Bonnier News is the journalistic part, like the journalists and reporters and so on.
And are they almost always connected to the different applications, or are they also some parts journalistic role part of Bonnier News? Or is that more decentralized, so to speak?
How would we describe that? It's somewhere in between, I would say. Mostly decentralized, just given the scale of the local news.
And the different content, I mean, like from cars to food.
So a reporter is normally connected to a single brand. But you have a set of centralized-ish domains that works across the domain or brands. Right?
And we try to, like, it's from case to case. I mean, some cases are narrow enough that they should probably happen at the brand level, for example. And we also have business units to make this a little bit more complicated. So
of course.
So business units is like a subset of brands, for example. So Expressen is a business unit. Dagens Nyheter also is a business unit. So Kamratposten, for example, is a part of the Dagens Nyheter business unit.
But I recognize this. In Scania, you have Germany and UK are their own business units, whilst business unit Asia consists of Singapore. So it's to group them to get some sort of balanced view on business unit level is quite common.
Yeah, all of this will be in the test that will be given after the podcast.
I have my ChatGPT. Is that okay? How we start every meeting now with.
Awesome. But the teams that you work with is mainly in one of these domains. Is it called like a tech domain then, or what's the?
Well, of course, it's a part of the tech area, I would say. We have domains and we have areas. Just to make it a bit more complicated. It actually makes it easier, at least when you look at it from an organizational perspective. So, but in our case, we have like the data science and AI and machine learning domain yet to be fully named because we haven't gotten to that part really yet. But in this case, we have so strong bonds and dependencies between those teams that it just kind of made sense to structure it this way. But like already, for example, the data science team is already. The data science team has grown a lot during the last years because there's so many different parts of Bonnier News that are depending on the data science team. But that also makes it hard to kind of place it in one domain, right? So we kind of ended up with, all right, so we have enough different dependencies now to kind of just logical make sense to put it in one domain.
But have you had the conversation, I mean, like we have used many different words on this, on hub and spoke, this whole conversation on how do we organize platform teams that provide services for value stream or domain teams. And then we have in the spoke that we have, I work a lot with Scania, and here we end up with engineers and data scientists, both in the central platform teams and also embedded in the different. Is this happening also in Bonnier News when, when, as you say, data science or analyst or data work is happening?
Both things, I would say. Like, we have a strong central presence of data science teams and so on. But I mean, there's still, to some extent, things like data science. I mean, first of all, the term in itself is a little bit hard to kind of frame. I mean, but I would argue that some data science happens in different parts of the organization.
Of course.
But also, I would say that data science is happening in the central analytics team also, because where do we draw the line?
But this is an ongoing conversation. How to solve this.
I think the organizational topics is really interesting, and it's easy to get stuck here as well.
But I mean, if you want to get a little bit better understanding for kind of what is a typical thing for the data. I mean, maybe you, Hans, could talk a little bit about like what is the actually data science team at Bonnier News doing?
Some example products that you work
with.
Instead of talking about organization, because that will really not help to understand what is actually going on, right?
Yeah, I love it.
It's still interesting, but still, products would be super cool. Perhaps we can give some.
We can. I think it's great to talk about the real stuff, and then you can, and then how are you organized around this concrete product or topic or use case. That's easier to understand for sure.
So our current focus product, I would say, is personalization, and the idea is to have, let's say, one of our brands wants to get started on the path. Then we want to offer them like a white label solution. And
white label solution, what does that mean?
So we make one solution that is good enough for all brands. So it's supposed to be able to be used by both Expressen and the local news and Dagens Industri. But if they want something that's bespoke, so that's specific for just one brand, then they have to build that on their side, basically. So we're from the... I mean, it's not as clear-cut as that, but that's our main intention, at least.
But it makes sense, because if you're going from a complete newbie, they don't have any, they haven't started, they want to start implementing, then you get the generic personalization engine.
Exactly.
And then when you get a generic personalization engine as a service, you start using it, you're maturing, and then you realize you need to tweak it, fine-tune it, you need to add the next layer of features. And then you might end up in a very brand-specific or very content-specific fine-tuning.
Yeah.
Is that summary?
That's a very good summary.
Okay.
And what do you personalize? Can you give some examples?
Oh, it's, for example, one of our biggest brands is Expressen, and if you read an article at Expressen, then when you scroll past the end, we show like a list of suggested further reading articles below the starting article.
And this whole field is so interesting how it has evolved. How much is now? How dynamic is the personalization engine today?
I mean, it's very much under development, I would say, but we have seen, just comparing to, I mean, we started out with some very simple algorithms, like what's the most trending article currently, or like what's the most popular in the last 24 hours or something. And just comparing to that, we see a large
lift.
A large lift switching to the personalized algorithm.
And can you, I mean, I get a recollection from my old Spotify days, we had playlist extensions and whatnot that you can do. Can you speak anything about, like, in general, about the techniques that you have experimented with?
Yeah, I'm thinking that probably we can, and I also feel that there are some things that could be somewhat controversial. So let's talk about them.
I love that angle.
That twist was
So-
awesome.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
First
fun.
of all, I would say that, I mean, how well does a personalization engine need to perform? Like, what is the benchmark? Right now, by the look of it, today the personalization. First of all, it's Hans is very humble here, but it's rolled out at scale.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so it's been used for
Yes,
some time.
a lot.
Okay.
And by the looks of it, it's by far the best personalization we have deployed at Bonnier News, and it's performing very well. Even if you compare to other types of content selections, for example, lists or manual content selection and so on, we see good results. The thing here is, of course, that it doesn't really need to outperform anything. It just needs to be as good as a manual selection, for example. Right? So it doesn't need to be better. It just needs to be match.
You mean to reduce manual labor?
Yes,
for
exactly.
example?
To reduce manual labor and then be able to scale it in some
Yes,
ways
exactly.
infinitely,
Exactly.
then you have one.
Yeah.
The rest of this is used. That is margin.
Yes,
now you're
exactly.
making margin.
Exactly.
And how much more? So you won, but how much you're gonna win with?
And
That's the argument.
Yeah, and I think that this is like the thing with a lot of different AI systems, that you kind of expect them to perform better, but they don't really need to perform better, right? They just need to perform at the same level. I mean, this is like the hard problem with talking about self-driving cars, for example, is that, well, the bar is set to no accidents, right? But I mean, realistically, it only needs to perform as good as like what we have today, right? We don't have 0 accidents at the roads today, right?
Now you could argue that, I mean, like, in order to make sure that we are pushing it, it should be better. But it can never be 0.
No, I mean,
And I think you're trying to make a quite profound point here, that we are looking at it wrong sometimes when we are trying to make business cases, and when we're having quite idiotic arguments in types. Should we do this or not do this, or we can't use this because it's only 15%. Yeah, but your guys is working on 30%.
Yeah.
Do you actually try to measure the business value or added value by removing manual labor and simply receive the same kind of level? Or?
I mean, that's not the purpose. Isn't to kind of roll out something so we can scale back. Like, the idea here is, of course, that to just kind of make sure that like competent people don't spend a lot of time doing things they don't want to do, or maybe like they put a lot of work into something that's given a little.
But you could argue that they become more productive then. They can do other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That is
They can
bringing
do
value in
more
other ways.
high value. High value stuff.
Yeah. But for them to be able to do that, the machine only need to perform as well.
Yeah.
Right?
But you could try to measure that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we measure stuff.
Do you have a measure for that, or is it more on?
Not for this case. For the manual labor, we don't measure it.
Yeah. No. I mean, mostly because it's not within the scope of what we're trying to achieve, right? We're just trying to see if we can roll out personalization that will engage users to a larger extent.
I have a rabbit hole we shouldn't go into now, but I've been in a lot of different conversations on how do we put KPIs and metrics around value. How should we measure value? And that kind of conversation comes back and forth. But so this is a quite interesting topic, because as you're saying, in advertising is one of those areas where you are very close to the actual objective function. So then it's a lot to learn from you guys, in my opinion, from other teams that has not as much experience of this. So maybe that's a good topic. How do we measure value of this stuff? But not now.
Yeah. And even I think that from a data perspective, the even more controversial take here is that basically most publishers and other type of content actors as well spend a lot of time with metadata, right? Setting manual metadata, setting up structures for when metadata should be set and by whom and when,
for like news articles.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when we do the personalization, like I don't think that data science it doesn't look at the metadata, because the vector distance is far superior.
Interesting.
Yeah, fun. Other
So the
techniques.
content is more important than the metadata.
Yeah, we don't need metadata.
You can do vector distance on the content simply.
Yeah.
So many interesting
Can we talk about
topics
that? Can we talk about that? So the hardcore ideas around personalization is vector distance to other content. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think, and that is not like a Bonnie new secret. I think that is basically how this is done.
But to the outside, to learn how it is done then. So generically.
Hans?
I mean, the basic idea is to look at the reading patterns of our readers and represent them in a embedding.
And reading patterns as in how long you stay on an article or what?
Which articles or?
Yeah, exactly. So
all of them.
So we have a fixed time period that we study, and then we pick the articles that we think the user was most interested in. And that's like a combination of how long, how much time did they spend reading the article, how long is the article, and we do some heuristics basically based on that.
So you need heuristics to actually approximate which of all the articles were they actually reading within this time frame.
Yeah, and
you can get close, but you can't really see exactly where on the page they are.
No, exactly. But if you're on your mobile app, we know exactly which article they're reading, but we don't know which one they were actually most interested in. But we can approximate that by looking at how long they spend reading a certain article.
Got it.
Yeah.
So then you get a set of vectors, I guess, per article in some sense, and you can weight them in different ways, or how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as if I were to use a RAG architecture, for example. If I just want to vectorize a text string and I search like a whatever document, set of documents I have that are also vectorized, embedded, right? Like the cosine similarity search basically just give me the nearest neighbors to whatever that text string.
So that's actually very similar to how Discover Weekly works in Spotify.
I mean that's what I'm saying. I don't think that this is like any secrets, right? But the thing is here that you don't need metadata.
Yeah, I mean, that's super cool. But the problem then, is if you create like a single vector represent a user. This is my centroid, so to speak, of what I like as an article. And then you simply say, give me the most similar kind of articles. It can be that the user have, sports interest, it can have a tech interest, and it can be a set of very distinct kind of vectors. If you move in the middle, you could actually end up at a point which is not interesting at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're experimenting with different ways of calculating that centroid. So, and we also have experiments where we don't use a centroid, but just use the articles that the user was most interested in, and then do a re-ranking. So let's say you have these 10 articles were your top articles. Then we do a search in vector space and get the most similar, and then we do a re-ranking of the results from those 10 articles and present that as the...
So this is the evolution where you kind of, okay, this is the step, maturity level 1 we got here. Okay, what next now? And then you can see these challenges, and now you have a hunch, we need to go the ranking way.
And then of course, I mean, if you have vectorized data, you can do this at, for example, like on the content level also. Like, can we easily find more content to kind of link that are relevant to this content, for example?
Yeah, you can expand on when you have found the engine principles, you can expand on that model.
At one use case that happens, but in reverse. We started with the last case I gave you, and then we kind of moved into personalization.
Super cool.
Are you going to try to do some clustering perhaps per user to say that these are the top clusters for each user? It's similar to the my daily mix in Spotify, if you remember that kind of thing.
Yeah. We have a long backlog of things we want to try.
Super cool to hear. I think we have so many interesting topics to cover, so perhaps we should move over to another topic and start to speak a bit about journalism, I think, in general, in some sense. And we all know that social media had a big impact on journalism, and then it was a big fight to try to keep traditional media compared to how people consumed news in social media, etc. And I guess it's been going on for at least 10 years or something, or what do you think?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And if you were to describe it, what do you think happened, during the social media rise, so to speak, and how the traditional media were, forced to adapt in some way? What happened then?
Well, happened in what regard?
I mean, okay, let me phrase it in a bit more controversial way, as you like to hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would guess that a lot of journalists were, they had to downsize a bit. They were forced potentially to write articles with a bit more clickbait type of titles, which a lot of social media people were doing, and they were receiving a lot more traffic, and then you were losing it to social media, and that meant that it became much more aggressive in terms of competition. And you were forced potentially to downgrade the quality of an article to get the clicks and views that you needed.
Yeah.
Would that be fair? Or
yeah, and I also think that if you look at most brands that are doing well, they kind of moved away from that again, and I think that is quite obvious why. I should also preface this where I'm not a journalist. Hans is not a journalist either, so whatever we say is basically just...
Oh, it's an afterwork, so it's fine.
So, but I think the thing is that... if you looked at... what's his name? If you looked at the hooked model, for example, like you have this model to drive people into engaging more with the product. So you have a trigger, and that could be me walking down the road and I see like this plume of smoke and like fire trucks and so on. And up until that point, I didn't have any need for like looking into my local news. Suddenly I have a large need of doing that. So in that case, I will need to do an action, and that action will be to interact with a product, hopefully a Bonnie News product. So I will like open my news app or use my browser or whatever, and I will like go into the local news brand to see, is there any information about what I like, because I have this information need. It goes back to information theory. You have a need for information, and then you have like someone that could provide what you need, hopefully, right? So you have to do some actions to get that information. And if you get that information, you your trust for that product will increase. And that means that you can engage the user in different ways, sign up for a newsletter or enable push notifications and so on. If you enable push notifications, then basically the news product can create a need when you're sitting home in your couch, because you get a push notification and you didn't know that you had an information need until this very second when you read the push notification, right? And what I'm going here with this is that, I mean, if you break this in like, say, for example, that you post something on social media, we say that we have this incredible list of something, and you won't believe your eyes what's at like the 8th thing in this list, right? So you click on that article, and you go through the article and all the ads and whatnot, and you just kind of end up disappointed. You're like, you started with, I have this need of knowing what's the incredible thing that is in this list of things, right? And when you're disappointed, instead of like increasing user engagement, you just kind of lower the trust for the product. So, and I think that is basically, sooner or later, if you build viral products, those products will meet end of life, because you kind of used up
because the trust.
Yeah.
But are you saying now that there's some sort of pendulum going on?
Yes. Yes.
So it started with, okay, we need to follow the money. We need to follow the clicks.
Yeah.
So we need to adjust to something way more high pace.
Yeah.
In the end now you see that, there is certainly a niche for proper journalism.
Yeah.
And we need to find that niche, and we need to cater to that very concrete information need, and not stumble on what is real journalistic information need versus all the other bullshit information need that we don't want to be part of.
Yeah.
So that's the pendulum to finding your identity back again.
Yeah. So if you talk to any editor at Bonnier News or any other publisher, they will probably say that the greatest value lies in the quality, right? And the trust you can put into. And it turns out that is completely true, right? When the smoke settles from like the viral sites and like the social media, like the clickbaiting, when the smoke settled, it turned out that was right. And I don't know if I understood it at the time, but obviously people smarter than me realized that this is just gonna.
But I would imagine that the cows is there, the smoke settles.
Yeah.
But for me, I have no data. I don't know this, but my sense in myself is that the map was redrawn. So what we had as newspaper behavior before digital, and that I was a paper boy for Dagens Nyheter when I was a kid. I worked with for your company. That world is gone. So we are now in a different landscape that we now need to find the identity. Yes. But the size of that market, or how that market looks like now after this whole dust is settled, it is probably different, right? And we are still trying to figure that out. Or is Bonnier News starting to see the contours of this? Because I think the whole media space has been in a shambles to find their feet here.
Yeah, well, I think that finding the contours is a good way of framing it. I think that in the end, we just kind of need to make sure that the product is actually of value to the user, right? That is the only kind of way to invest in product development, making sure that whatever the need is for this user, we can actually provide, rather than like using that need for, like, for example, looking at something completely different. If you look at, for example, online casinos, for example, like the magic trick that an online casino needs to do is, because everybody, I guess, I don't use online casinos, but I guess that the main reason that people would enter an online casino is because they want to make quick money, right? Or maybe they want to make a lot of money. So that is kind of what they feel that they would need.
Or they think they have fun. They think it's fun to gamble.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you start off with, maybe I should join this because maybe I can get some money out of this. But of course, I mean, if the online casino will pay every user whatever the user feels is a good amount to be satisfied, that would be a really bad business idea. So they need to make this magic trick, this illusion, right? So I guess you came here for the money, but you're staying because you never know what is going to happen if you push this button one more time, right? So, and if you leave now, you will never know what would happen if you push that button one more time, right? So that is what is driving engagement. It's not like the promise of you will like just hold on, you might be rich anytime now, right? That is not what is driving engagement. Engagement is driven by saying that if you close this browser window now, you never know what would happen if you click that button one more time.
And that's the same in social media, right? You never know what will happen if you hit refresh one more time.
Exactly my point. Right.
Sorry.
No. It's I mean that in a very good way, because
No, but so that consumption of media consumption is something else than to have an information need.
Yes.
It's the same as the gambler who is hooked on looking at pushing the button again, has forgot about the money.
Yeah.
We're not looking at news anymore. We are hooked we're on drugs.
Yeah.
What comes next? Question.
Yeah. And I think that the journalistic products of quality need to not trying to do that bait and switch, right? So
but how far have we really come there then? I mean, who is really influencing the society the most these days? I mean, we have influencers that, perhaps people trust more. And if we take the American election and Taylor Swift and how she could actually move the election by herself in some sense, I think before at least, the traditional media had a really, really big stake.
Yeah.
But not so much still today, or what do you think?
No, that have changed completely, I would say. But it mostly is the means of distribution, right? So you're able to distribute information in other ways. If you go back, I don't know, 30 years, in that case, and like the local newspaper at like the editorial desk in the morning, you could have discussions about what will the opinion, what should we decide is the opinion, right?
I can choose that.
Yeah. Not necessarily talking for a Bonnier News brand, just in general. I think that when you have like monopoly on local news
and on distribution.
Yeah, and on distribution, then you can also kind of drive opinion, right? Yeah. I think those days are over.
Yeah. But do you think it can come back where, media institutes really have the similar or close to similar kind of distribution as well? Or is it over?
Do we want it to come back?
Good question.
I mean, I think it's proven that journalistic products can thrive at this landscape as well. I mean, there are competitors of different kinds than before, right? So you need to be like on top of your game. But I think that's to some extent, for all products, not talking specifically about Bonnier News, I think that's always a good thing, because you can't resort to, for example, clickbaiting, because then you will kind of lose whatever edge you have, right? So
can we go down in a little bit of a fascinating rabbit hole?
I thought this was a rabbit hole.
Now we're doing the rabbit hole on the rabbit hole. Yeah. Sorry, we are completely off track. What are we talking about? Because I think this conversation about what is the new media landscape and how to find our feet in those contours are super interesting. And who wasn't fascinated of the American election? Who wasn't fascinated of the role a guy like Joe Rogan plays as an is he news? Is he, what is he really, right?
Yeah.
Is he social media? Of course he is. He's a YouTuber, but he is bigger than that. And in today, and this whole conversation, I mean, I don't know how much you have been following, but I've been trying to untangle who is talking shit about who's telling truth about who, from the Democrats to the Republicans, and there are so different narratives being explained from the different angles. So it's really polarized and really confusing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that bad in Sweden, but I think we are seeing patterns that this complexity of who is pushing what agenda has never been more difficult.
No.
And I think it's a big shame that media outlets have lost a bit of their power, because I think there is a big need for finding sources of truth and institutions you can trust, because it's so much deepfakes out there, and certainly influencers and other people that are not schooled in this and write for other reasons than.
But I would argue there's a big difference here. I don't sense that the Swedish traditional media has been bashed. In America, it becomes almost like a religious war. Where some of the big newspapers are fundamentally accused of wokeism and going a very, very specific agenda from one side of the political spectrum. And of course, they don't agree with that, of course. But it's a very, very polarized view on. How do we understand traditional media? I don't think it's like that in Sweden. Do you think so? I don't think so. What is your take?
I don't think it's as bad, but I think you see some indications of that here too. I mean, Dagens Nyheter, they are not very popular in certain
age categories or
8 categories, or like right-leaning groups, for example. And
so you can tell that their political color of the newspaper, so to speak.
Yeah,
It's we don't believe what is. You can see tendencies also in Sweden.
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And we can speak about this forever, but I think we need to get back to AI in some way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's on a tangent anyway, I would say. I mean, you start with the social media, but I guess where we're going with this is that we are kind of adding more complexity to that question because...
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, let's move to that topic.
You went into the social media rabbit hole when you should have just passed that and say, what will AI do to all of this?
Yeah.
So we have a very big context, background story now. Moving into the real question.
Yeah, and perhaps just connecting to the story, if we speak a bit about the LLM dilemma, the AI impact that we had, perhaps if we take the American election, I think a lot of people thought it would be a big problem with deepfakes, etc. What do you think AI has had as impact? If we take the US election, for example, as an example, was it more or less than you expected?
I didn't see big impact coming from fake AI.
This is our conclusion too.
Yeah, and if you have big platforms like social media platforms, and then I mean it's enough if you have a strong voice like Joe Rogan. You don't need fake content. You can just influence people's mind without.
I think it's an interesting example. Is the election in Argentina. It was in 1 year ago approximately, but they had a lot of generative AI in that election, but it wasn't for deepfake purposes. It's more like it's a way to just communicate.
Right.
So you create like a teddy bear around your candidate and you want to make him look like a safe and trustworthy person, and you have a vampire around your competitor, but everyone can see it's fake. It's not trying to fake that it's fake.
Satire. It's political satire.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people were more afraid than they should, or looking, back, it didn't have the negative impact that we feared a bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And to tie that back into the previous discussion, I think that the thing with deep fakes are, I guess, that most usually they are products and distributed by sources that don't have a lot of staying power, right? For sooner or later they will turn out to be deep fakes,
Or troll,
and then they kind of disappear from out of focus. And I think that is kind of goes back to what a news product needs to be. News products needs to be things that we ensure have staying power, right? And if need to be able to trust in, and I guess the same thing goes for things like Joe Rogan, for example. I mean, Joe Rogan's to some extent, I guess, always need to be on brand because he needs to kind of build up some kind of staying power. And
So be on brand, being staying authentic to his own identity and who the fuck he is. Sort of thing.
So, and I think that I would argue that maybe the big impact of deep fakes are the exact opposite. It's not that we are exposed for a lot of things that are untrue. I think it's much easier to argue for the things that are true are not. Like, for example, if anyone does any bad interviews, or for example, they will always argue it's editing, right? Right.
But maybe if I try to follow on, someone argued that we will simply adapt that the baseline is that everything is fake, and now you need to qualify truth. So as long as we adapt as humans to that, we can't take stuff on face value. You cannot take anything on face value in terms of what you see and read, in terms of how you can manipulate. And maybe it's even better now that we truly understand that. Maybe we've been faked with pictures for years that we didn't understand. So now we're getting to a point where this is the cat is out of the bag, and now we need to adjust and balance the way we validate the way we go about what is information, what is entertainment. Do you see what I mean? Like, so so there's a calibration going on here, and if we get that right, I would argue that that opens up new data and AI-driven features in order to prove credibility and trust.
Yeah, and also I think that it doesn't have to be content generation per se. I think that one of the strong aspects of AI and like machine learning, looking at the media landscape, is that you are able to aggregate everything, right? Like
Exactly.
a person with enough exposure in media, you will be able to kind of dig out and edit and like present that person in a certain light. You don't have to fake anything, right? What's at your power is the possibility to kind of just go through everything.
Yeah.
Just having an AI go through and like find every time this person says this word or does this gesture or whatnot, and then you can just kind of edit it together, right? So no like deep fake needed.
Yeah, but I really seen there is a new type of media product or news product that I think has evolved more in 2024. That is basically trying to build a product how they are on different articles, rating them, triangulating them with different facts, or and even clicking. Here is the positive side of the argument. Here's the, so they are trying to do unbiased news, and they are doing unbiased news not by presenting one news, but maybe they have one news story, but they are trying to build the full landscape on the topic. And I think that is high integrity. I think this is product development of the real quality newspapers to show the, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen those types of services? I forget the example names. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, like there are these news sites that are literally about truthfulness or balancing different aspects of the same news.
I guess we can, if we speak about the infamous filter bubble and that people get stuck in a certain type of news all the time, then it's just inflating all the time your beliefs in that, and you don't see anything outside the bubble.
Right.
But perhaps using technology, it can actually be in help to get out of the bubble if you start to also have news that is a bit more objective in some sense.
Sure.
Right. And so perhaps going back a bit. Okay, so AI can of course be used by deepfake. I don't think that's something that Bonnier does. I hope not. But can you perhaps elaborate a bit more? What does Bonnier use if we take generative AI for? Can you give some examples, perhaps? Does the journalists use it on a regular basis? Is there anything you can talk about?
So we use it in different parts of the organization. The one where our team is most involved is we have like a news aggregator. So like we were saying, we have almost 200 brands or something like that. But we also have, you can buy a subscription where you get access to something like 50 brands. I don't remember. A package. Yeah, exactly. And then the question is, now I have access to all this content, but I don't have time to read 50 magazines.
Yeah.
So how should I get value from all these 50 brands? So then we have a site where all the content is displayed and also personalized for you. So if you like to read about a certain topic, or you write,
and that's for the journalists themselves, not for the users.
It is for the users. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you buy this package subscription, you can access content through this site.
And is it like a chat? Are you starting now to make a user interface so they can they can find and they can prompt where they want to go deeper into this package?
So our team is working on finding news stories that are written about by several different brands and combining them to a single story and giving like a short overview of the
Deduplicating the stories.
Yeah, exactly. And also, so there we're using some level of generative AI to write the summary. But then there's work also going towards what you were saying with chatting with the content, so to speak.
Yes.
But maybe Magnus is more involved with that work.
Yeah. So, for example, we have added what we call trigger questions, basically finding relevant content to the article you're reading and figuring out what is a good approach to kind of get the user to notice this article. So for example, we generate questions that the user might have from the article in front of the user, and then we say, right, so these are questions that you could dive into.
That's the perplexity way.
Yeah, exactly, the perplexity way, right?
Oh, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
How many times have we not clicked on those questions?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, well, talking about rabbit holes. So I think that the best way to think about AI when talking about approaching end users or doing product development, you could basically say that all AI is UX.
Oof. Okay, that's a strong statement, but okay.
Yeah, let's go with this. I love it. I love this entry point.
Let's say that I brought with me to this podcast, I had a black box, right? No interfaces. And I would just put it on the table and would say that this is the most advanced AI ever developed. And we would sit and look at this black box for a while, and then you will ask, well, how do we...
What do we do with it?
Yeah, and I say nothing. There's no interfaces.
There's no interfaces.
Right. So, but it's the world's most advanced AI. We don't have any interfaces.
Actually, I'm glad you said that. You can't open it, but it's such
exactly.
a super intelligence in this.
Yeah, right.
But don't open it.
Yeah, right. So clearly, AI is a UX question, right?
Somewhere.
Yeah.
How do we interact with the AI? So I see your point.
Yeah.
You're reducing the point to a very tricky topic.
Yeah. So
Lovable is doing the same, by the way.
yeah. So so if you look at this from a news product perspective, right? We need to understand if we're going to use AI to create better news products, we need to understand what is the interaction that is actually increasing the value of the news product here. Like,
I fully agree.
right. So, because if we don't do that, if you don't do the UX part, well, I think that if we do it in our product development, it's about accessibility, right? We make our products more accessible. And that could be, for example, maybe you need the article in another language, or you need it to be shorter, or you need it to be read to you by some like text to speech or whatnot, right? So let's say that if we do that in our product and we understand that this is the user need, then it's accessibility, right? But if we don't do that, then the end user will, because I can't access, I don't feel that this information is easy for me to access, so I will just kind of ask ChatGPT to go to this news site and read the article for me and just summarize it in points, for example. In that case, we don't have an end user as a consumer anymore, right? It's the tool that is the consumer, right? And the tool aggregates, and then the UX of that tool is actually the user experience, right? So for us, AI needs to be UX, because otherwise we won't have end users, we will have tools, and those tools can do whatever. I mean, maybe
but it could be a good value as well to have tools as a user, shouldn't it?
The problem here is, of course, that, I mean, if you use ChatGPT, well, or for example, let's take DeepSeek, for example. Let's say that I use DeepSeek and we write something about China, right? It's possible that the tool will not convey the original content in the way that we intended, right?
Sure, but you can increase your distribution perhaps thanks to the tool.
Yeah, but in the end, it's like a losing equation, because like if you build a subscription product and you build for end use, I mean, in the end, otherwise you will provide data sources, not a news product.
But
I think I follow what you're trying to say here. So when you're doing a very, in a sense, provocative statement, reducing the AI.
I didn't even know that it was provocative.
No, but you're reducing all the brilliance of a large language model and all this back down to the UX. But I follow that because let me try another way to say the same words, but taking it out of this context. Goes back to how to make AI agents work effectively and all this.
I would phrase it differently.
Can I try first? Because you don't know where I'm going.
I can guess, but okay.
No, because it's very simple that in the end, when we do a tool like AI, we're doing it to improve the flow of whatever work we're trying to do. In this context, we're reading news or we're interested in news. If I flip it to any other context, we have a workflow. We have someone working, someone needing to get a job done, and we want to do it more effectively. So here we now talk about, we have an AI here, we need to automate stuff, and we can do that we can do that smart, and we can put in an agent and do it automatically, and we use the word automation. But what I think is missed when we are only looking at the techniques of the technology is that any time you have automation, inherently you're augmenting someone's workflow. And every time you're augmenting someone's workflow, ultimately, if this is going to work or not is about the interface between the human and whatever the AI is doing in that workflow. And so what you're saying now, that if we want to have value and from our AI, we need to secure that it augments the socio-technical workflow. Now, in fancy words, that we have people that is human flesh and blood, it processes, the process how we consume news. It needs to fit into our workflow. When I use my Spotify, it needs to fit into my flow of how I want to use music. And you can take that generic thought into every single.
Let me disagree a bit here, because I disagree with both of you. So
because you can't. So if you disagree with this, we need to go to the bottom with it, because you can't disagree with fundamentals.
And you are fundamental.
Okay,
let me try to explain.
Techniques augments workflows is fundamentals. Yes.
So AI can be about many things, and it can have many purposes to work with AI. If you go back to the original definition of AI, it was the science and engineering of building intelligent machines. If you take the scientific approach of this, it has nothing to do with the value for the user. It has to do with the knowledge of understanding how things work. So that can be a very useful thing to do as well. So if you want to work with AI to produce more knowledge, then you're not considering the end user value at all. If you then work with engineering, you do work with a value. Yeah. And I think what you're referring to here is, when you say UX, you mean user value in some sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I do too. I
would call that not UX, I would call it engineering, because it's more than UX, I think, is required to really provide value.
Yeah, but sorry, you continue.
Yes. No, it's fine.
No,
sure.
No.
But let's stay at this topic for a while.
Okay.
This is a good topic.
All right.
Okay.
So let's say that you're working with building intelligent machines,
yes.
right? You're working with collecting and understanding and in different ways handling information, because that is like the pure definition of AI.
Yes.
Right. Are anyone gonna use this information?
But there is still a good reason and to have the purpose of building knowledge.
Even if no one is going to access the knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Right.
That's the reason for doing research, scientific research.
Yeah, but scientific research still you need to publish in academic papers and so on.
But not build products.
Right, but I mean, to be able to publish in, for example, academic papers, you need to show the text.
The purpose then is knowledge, not products.
Yeah, yes, I will still argue that it's UX, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
then you have a very broad
UX.
definition of UX.
I follow that. The way and engineering and all that, of course, this is an engineering.
UX becomes like a concept that encompasses everything.
Yes,
yes.
UX.
Then the topic becomes useless.
No, I'm just saying.
But we're going into Mary Parker Follett, 1925. She states before the times of data, the computation, that we cannot really separate the human and the machine in the work they're doing. Yeah. She's examining and working and writing on this in the 1920s. That the I don't know how she says it, but the actions of the machine and the actions of the human cannot be in the end separated, because it's how they interact that creates the value. And it's in this context, if you reduce that down to the AI is part of a socio-technical system, which is then part of what we do, what we're supposed to be doing, what value we want to get out of. In this sense,
thinking engineering, there is a big purpose for science.
Yeah, but also it needs to be thought about how we're going to build upon that science, right? So
not when you're doing the science.
All right, but I mean,
the thing is, I usually argue for engineering so much more than science.
Yes,
but now I feel I need to, for once, define science, which I think has its place as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we started in product development, so we're kind of far away from products.
No, but so the argument here is fully an engineering topic, and from engineering all the way out to actually not only engineer the system, but to engineer the interaction between the AI and the human. That's what we ultimately talk about, because we need to engineer a human physical, human artificial workflow. We need a socio-technical workflow. That's what we are talking about, and you are doing that, and then we are going to the exact interface where they are supposed to interact. How that interaction is supposed to happen.
I think engineering has much more than to do with the interface as well. So I think you can broaden that discussion, and I will still disagree with the thing that UX is everything. So
I mean, I'm not saying it's everything, but I'm saying that let's say it like this: applied machine learning is UX, right?
I would say it's more closer to engineering than pure research, but it's still.
This is one of the most interesting discussions I had.
I think we could take this on.
I agree with you both, because it's great engineering to get to a good experience.
Yeah. So, but to kind of return to where we started off and kind of get
we close it maybe
get
now.
on track. I guess one way to talk about this at some higher or lower level, depending on your programmer or not. I mean, let's remove AI and UX from the discussion. Say that you have a person in a wheelchair, and then you have this like bus stop, and the only way to get to that bus stop is like some ground that is not paved, for example. And there are two ways to do that. You could either like prepare the ground and pave it so it's easier for the person in the wheelchair to get to the bus station, or the person with the wheelchair can get, I don't know, larger tires for the
all-terrain wheelchair.
Right. So and some people might do that, right? A lot of other people will start using another bus stop, for example. Right, and there you have like the difference. Like either you put the responsibility for on the user to apply whatever tools they feel needed to use the product, in this case the bus stop, or you prepare the way so you can take as many users in as possible into your product, right? And there you have like, should the user apply AI to access the product, or should the product use AI to make the product more accessible for the user, right?
Yes, I think we. Okay. Yes. Okay. We're still in engineering land. I can hear.
I kind of turned it because I felt that we were moving into like the seventh rabbit hole. If we were to go down to where AI actually is, and like.
Hans, I would love to hear it before we move to the next topic. You're a scientist as well.
Sure.
What's your do you have a preferred definition of science and engineering?
I can't say that I do at the top of my head.
Can I try mine and see what you think about it?
Yeah.
So I think science and engineering very much overlaps. It's hard to do science without having some engineering skills, and it's hard to do science without having some scientific skills. What I think is the difference between the two is the purpose for the work. So the purpose for science is very clear, is to build some kind of new knowledge that we haven't seen before. The purpose for engineering is to build a product that provides value for some set of users. That is the big difference between the two. But if you want to build like new knowledge for how you can add reasoning to an LLM from a scientific point of view, you probably need to build some prototype to try it out. So you need some kind of engineering skills, not the same level as putting it in production, but some kind of engineering to do that kind of scientific work, to do the experimentation of it. If you then come from an engineering point of view and say, I want to build a product like ChatGPT or the extend or recommend articles in Bonnier News, and you're thinking purely from an engineering point of view, you need to have the knowledge that is required to do so. But the purpose will always be, how can I build this product to maximize the value? And that's the difference. Either case it's maximizing knowledge, other case it's maximizing value.
Yeah, well, I agree, but also I feel that, all type of science needs to be like building blocks that you will be able to stand on, right?
Yes.
Because if you don't pass knowledge along, this kind of the point of societies is to kind of build upon the previous generation, right?
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. And then you can't put your science into a black box and say it's no way to interact with the scientific findings, because we haven't an interface for that. So, for example, peer review is an interface. People doing research that also have to give lectures, that's also an interface.
But my point is really that the main difference between science and engineering is the purpose.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I like this argument because, of course, we cannot argue that everything is interface, but we are trying to make a point that this is a very, very critical part of the whole equation. And if you get that wrong, everything else is lost, especially in product.
Yeah, and if you move all the way back to like business value of AI, in that case,
if you go into your reality of working with AI in Bonnier News, in reality, is it usable? Is it adoptable? Becomes core.
Yeah, but I don't feel that that's maybe a point that we could disagree a lot on. So I had more fun talking about the scientific.
No, we
part.
love it, and we had a little bit of rosy cheeks. It's always nice.
Yes.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
Awesome. So we have this kind of small break in the middle of the podcast to just take the discussion a bit differently and think about some of the top news that we have heard in recent weeks. And try to keep it very brief because we are a bit over time. We should have started a quarter past, but we got stuck in a rabbit hole speaking about science and engineering and UX and whatnot. But let's perhaps do a quick round of news as well. Henrik, do you have something you want to start with?
Okay, very quickly, the whole DeepSeek debacle that came out. We were actually talking about DeepSeek in R1 on the news show last Thursday. So for us it's old news, but the whole everything went viral happened afterwards. I was only going to make a remark that we've been talking about this podcast about, how do we invest and, how can we compete with the frontier models? And I think the angle here that I picked up on the most is that there is clearly a different argument on what is the moat, or we can never compete. Well, maybe you cannot compete exactly on the same game, but there are more games to be played. So this was one angle. The other angle was to pick up that there was in the end, we were comparing apples and pears. There was very, very nuanced, what is the cost? How much smarter is it? Yep. But my main angle was that, it's great. Open source, open innovation. If you do good stuff, don't be scared. You can compete. That was my take in the end. I don't want to go deeper than that, but it was funny because we talked about it and then the whole thing blew up.
Do you have any thoughts about DeepSeek, Hans?
I I agree. It's an impressive feat of engineering, I would say. What I've read about it so far, it didn't seem like they brought something entirely new into the world. They've done a very good job of applying already existing technologies.
Agreed.
Yeah. But that in itself is impressive.
Magnus, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think I just kind of agree with what you're saying. I think that the obvious most interesting thing with DeepSeek is that it's open source.
Yeah.
Because I feel that is basically, it's all the way back to what we talked about personalization. It doesn't need to outperform, it just needs to be as good. Right? I think that's true here as well. Open source model that is as good as the OpenAI O1 model. That's huge. It doesn't need to be better.
Yeah. Maybe it's only better at one thing, but at what it does, it can do.
And perhaps we should just recap a bit. Even though we spoke about it last week, it happened a couple of things this week, which was rather astonishing. And I think actually we should blame media in this case.
I think so too.
But let's get back to that. But
American media.
for one, we had a huge drop for NVIDIA. They lost like 17% of their stock market cap. More? What?
I'm losing money like
5 minutes.
I actually sold most of my NVIDIA stuff, so I'm laughing my ass off. But
I think
anyway,
I'm going to buy now. Now is the time to buy.
yes, I do think. I think I will buy actually NVIDIA.
I will buy NVIDIA stocks now.
Anyway, 70% is like $600 billion. It's like the Swedish GDP size kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like the largest value loss
ever in history.
Ever in history. And the funny thing is that I think that NVIDIA have made 7 of the top 10 highest value losses on stock market. NVIDIA is 7 of them.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
No, but I think also that media has been...
It's never a loss. Until
how you sell it.
Until it's sold.
Yeah. Do you own NVIDIA stock?
Do you own Pharmacia stock?
No, but I think also it's been very misleading in media, how it's been reported. And for one, I think, they spoke about, how much it costs, and it says like 5 or 3% of the total cost. But for one, they actually are using a pre-trained model, the V3 version, and then they're doing the fine-tuning above it. And to compare the cost of fine-tuning to do the pre-training is simply wrong.
Yeah. There's a lot of apples and pears in here.
And then secondly, if you compare it to GPT-4o or even the O1 model, that can handle both text and images. This one can only handle text, and images is actually much more complicated to handle and requires a lot more parameters and training data, especially in
so it's blown out of. So we can just argue it's blown out of proportion. It's interesting ideas, but then isn't it just blown out of proportion?
And then there are like a third thing saying basically they actually say that they had high quality data to do the fine tuning for R1 on. Where did they get it? Well, they did distillation from OpenAI. They even have, for the base one, the DeepSeek V3, the normal LLM that they had, if you asked it, what is the name of your model? It said, I'm GPT-4o. I mean, they even did a poor job of copying it. I mean, they should at least try to filter that out in some way. And obviously, they use distillation. And if you use that, then it's much simpler, because you get more high quality data, which they brag about. And they say, we have such high quality data. Well, yeah, because you cheated and you used another model to obtain it, right? Of course, that will be cheaper and better.
I don't have a mic, but I think it's a little bit polarized. So if OpenAI does this, then it's not cheating, then it's innovation. But if the Chinese are doing it, then it's cheating, right? You remember when OpenAI said, like, how did you train your data? Well, it's everything is good and stuff like that. They would stealing from the New York Post and everybody else, right? And now Sam Altman is complaining that Chinese are stealing his data, which is not his data.
It's a big difference here.
I read a comment on Hacker News yesterday that OpenAI is losing its job to AI.
That's funny.
That is good.
No, but I think it's a big difference here. If you have human written content, it's one thing, but they're having AI written content here. And they're stealing from another model. If OpenAI wasn't available, they wouldn't be able to build this model.
If Google was not available, OpenAI will not exist. What is the difference?
The difference is human data are available, and that is what OpenAI have used. So
but
it's certainly much easier. Imagine how much crap there is in human data, and OpenAI had to deal with that. This DeepSeek does not. So it's a big difference.
I think you could almost liken it to like industrial espionage, right?
Yes.
They're stealing the OpenAI technology and say, look, we made it much cheaper than.
No, it is not. It is not espionage, because we have been sitting here saying, you know what, the way we should compete in Sweden is to distill out baby models from the large frontier models. To try to do everything from scratch.
But it should be done in a legal way.
Yeah.
This wasn't illegal. They have, even in their terms of service, saying you're not allowed to build competing product from this. They have literally broken the rules
okay,
for doing that. True. So it's illegal, but China doesn't care about that. But that said, they did a number of, I think, innovative things for R1, especially being able to output Python code along with the text code when they do this synthetic generation for the reasoning part. and then use that to verify if it's an accurate solution or not. So there were some really cool innovations as well. But then, there is the whole aspect of national security, of geopolitics, and I had to, when I tried it myself and wrote, what's happened in Tiananmen Square, and then first it actually started to output rather factual, correct statements, but after 2 seconds, it's just blip, removed the content and said, sorry, I can't speak about this or something. And this is actually rather, you can think about why did they open source it,
Yeah.
Why did it give it away for free in that way? Well, you could say, are they nice to society? Well, it could also be some kind of other hidden agenda behind this, that they want to spread some more of their kind of propaganda. What do you think about that? Is that potentially what they're trying to do here?
Sounds plausible to me, at least. I mean,
Yeah.
can't read their mind.
I mean, obviously they don't own Nvidia stock yet, at least.
No, and so someone said, we said it many times before, open source has never been about charity. It's always been about the business model in some sense. And this is a business model as well. If what that exact business model is, I don't know. But no, we don't. Open source is a viable business model, period.
But you see it also among the US large language models, right? With the XAI versus OpenAI,
Yeah.
and how much should you correct for bias in the models, or should you never correct for bias, or
Should you steer the model in a certain direction?
yeah.
So there is a spectrum here. It's not black and white. It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
Should we stop there, or
stop
do you have
there.
some more? Or?
No, that was this sort of
Did you have some other news?
other
after you-
news, or
I don't know if you heard about this DeepSeek.
I mean, like we haven't commented on operator,
Yeah, should we go there?
and we haven't commented on O3 rumors.
No need.
Yeah,
No
O3's
need.
been open for a long time, I think.
But what do we need to say about operator? Are they better than Anthropic or not?
In some sense, I would say so. But it's more limited to just the browser. I think, Claude computer use can be
Computer
a bit more
use is
general.
wider, right?
Yes. But it's a nice, I think the engineering, not the science, but the engineering around the operator is better. They have a web browser in the cloud, and you don't have to start your own container and blah, blah, blah. It's easier than using just the API that Anthropic provides.
Right.
I love how this conversation kind of ended up that we need to make clear which part of the divide between science and engineering we are talking.
Yes.
Now I'm talking on the science side.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking at the engineering side.
But I saw
I think
one.
the UX for Anthropic is bad. Let's call it that.
But one of the key things that someone commented on that I picked up on, that makes sense. That resonates with me was that, I mean, like we're using the very first levels of this computer use or web browser use, and the core example was like today, when we are now sitting there and literally watching the computer doing our manual steps like we would do it in the same amount of time as we were doing it, it doesn't really add any time value. I literally need to set the whole job up and then go to the gym and then go back and use it. Well, is that really useful yet? But then we can anticipate this will be solved. This will be solved.
This is probably the first time where we actually are hitting things that are in our notes.
Yeah.
I think that we actually wrote something about this.
Oh, you did?
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Cool. Perhaps we should explain what operator is. Not everyone probably have heard about this news. So if you have some notes.
Well, operator, the short version there is of course that you can make OpenAI act upon your own behalf in basically acting as a web browser, and also the agent that have agency through that web browser. So you can say that, and I guess that it needs to go both ways, because I guess the provider of the web service or the website also kind of need to make sure that they are operator friendly with their design and structure and so on. But basically it's just saying that if this can be done using a web browser and the prerequisites are fulfilled, then I can ask OpenAI operator to do it for me, right? So, but it's quite, I wouldn't say it's narrow, but I think that a lot of those things maybe will kind of break apart if you move outside of like the verified websites, for example. I don't know. We'll see. But that's not what was in our notes. I think that what we wrote in our notes was that a good way to think about AI as an assistant is to think about, let's say that the tools I use in work, for example, the number of tools it's a constant, right? So if I add something else has to go.
Yeah.
Right. So we can't add, like now we have like these 28 tools, and now you also have the AI tools. So now we have 29 tools, right? That is not going to increase productivity. What we can do is that we can build smart, like the tools you already use can get smarter or replaced, right? Or you can end up with fewer tools, I suppose. But as long as operator is its own thing, right? Then you just add more and more tools. Like you have more and more different things that you need to switch between. It's basically using the ChatGPT app. In that case, if I'm gonna use that for translating and things like that, I will take my text, I will copy it, I will move over to ChatGPT, I will interact with ChatGPT, I will copy my text, and I will move back to whatever application I was in before, right? So we're just kind of adding more and more abstraction layers. So I feel that like the best way to think about AI as assistance is that we need to kind of think about the number of tools as, if not a constant, at least a number that should decrease, not increase.
I like
An
that.
operator can help to decrease it.
Hopefully, but it needs to do it perfectly. I mean, that's basically the same thing as the Google versus Tesla in self-driving. Like when Tesla says that we're gonna work ourselves towards 100%, right? And sooner or later we will end up in a situation where you don't have to use the steering wheel. And Google says that we're gonna build cars that don't have steering wheels, right? So in that case, they say that we remove one tool and we add the self-driving capability. While in Tesla you have like the steering wheel and the self-driving. And I feel that, I mean, as long as you have to touch the steering wheel from time to time, you're not, like, you still have to like do your duties as a car driver. I mean, you won't be able to get from point A to point B without a driver's license, for example. So
You could try it.
you could try. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, cool. And I think it's also, the engineering behind it, is so much better in OpenAI, and it's basically, integrated into the normal ChatGPT product as well, not just the API they have there. So, but also it seems to be rather immature still. It easily gets stuck in loops and doesn't get out of it. But then you have, the nice engineering, the UX feature of actually you can take control at several point, right?
we're at the engineering side now, just to make it clear.
Not science. They did add some scientific stuff as well, I think.
What was the hard problems they needed to solve? What was what's the engineering or research feat in operator that they wanted to I don't know.
So you have to, it basically has to take control of the mouse and keyboard, right?
Yeah.
So going from text input to actions on the screen.
It's actuator work, right? That was what they needed to solve.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate? Or would you want to elaborate?
Anthropic has done it before. I think they copied a lot of the stuff that they have been working with, but package is nicer, and but also it's kind of hard because it's such much higher frequency of the actions. You need to see what happened on the screen very quickly, and then interpret what happened on the screen and actually take actions. And it's still a bit slow, I would say. And then it's not so much science, but more engineering aspect of how to make it that fast. Since you can't wait for a number of seconds because everything becomes super slow then. So you have to be really innovative to make it work in this case for actually interpreting the screen. Good luck. Oh, I shouldn't say that. DeepSeek has launched their image generator as well recently, so they probably will get into this space as well soon. But it is so much harder to interpret an image than it is to interpret text, and do that very, very quickly, and then generate an action like in a very high frequency is really hard. And they had this kind of CUBA model as well, computer use agent that they call it. And anyway,
But this is just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
Of course.
Good. I think we stop it here with news.
Yes. Okay. Good. Let's see. We have a bit too many topics here, so I think I'll jump down a bit here. I would love to hear a bit about the scientific aspect of the PhD works you're doing with WASP. So, Hans, you are now the industrial supervisor for a PhD student. Can you please describe a bit more? What are you and he going to do there?
Yes. So, I don't know. Does everyone know about WASP or? Yeah.
You can give a quick introduction.
A quick introduction is good.
So it's a Wallenberg-funded research project that started in 2015 and is supposed to go until 2031. And it's the biggest ever in Swedish history. I think it's 6 billion crowns.
6.5, I think.
6.5 in total. And they are focused on AI in different ways. Started out maybe more towards security and autonomy. But the part that we're interested in is media and language.
Sorry,
media and language.
Media language.
Media and language.
Yeah, so they have different research areas, they call them. And the one we're involved with.
Oh, it's a WASP research arena thing?
Research arena, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And it's the research arena is called media and language.
Yes.
It's their WASP research arena.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our PhD student, Lucas Borgen, he is looking at specifically LLMs and how can we make them useful for Swedish media companies.
And this is nice because WASP is traditionally very scientific and very little engineering, but now with the WASP research arena, they're trying to get more in the engineering side.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Sorry, Magnus.
No, it's just very funny.
We're never going to get out of that tick from now.
No. I hope this stays on for every podcast going forward.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So, but obviously, it's the starting point was just noticing how much text we have available from Bonn News. I mean, possibly we could start from over 100 years ago with Dagens Nyheter text, but we're not going to go back that far for this project. But we have large amount of text from all the Bonn News brands, and the idea is, can we make the LLMs more useful for people who are working as journalists or editors or basically the journalistic side of things.
Are there any sort of research theses here or angles that you're pursuing?
I think they will crystallize as we go along. It's as Anders was saying, it's very engineering focused. But one research topic I think will be just around evaluation. So how can we measure did this get better or not? So that will be tricky.
Like the quality of the content of an article or what?
I mean, there are benchmarks that we could use. There's one called, I think, Scand-Eval, and there are different benchmarks, but maybe we would need a new benchmark to measure like usability for journalists or usability for editors, and especially for Swedish. I mean, there are lots of English benchmarks that we could maybe
tweak, fine-tune,
or auto-translate or something like that. But
so evaluating if new techniques improves journalism,
right,
and then finding a way to measure that and benchmark that.
Exactly. So we have already tried to use LLMs for certain journalistic tasks. So, for example, can we use it to generate ideas for what's a good headline for a certain article, for example. Can we ask an LLM to generate 5 different headlines and then just let the winning one take over once we publish it, or something like that? But what the journalists have told us in feedback is that they don't capture the tone of whatever publication is trying to use it.
Exactly.
So
That's a deeper, the branding is, that's a deeper, much deeper topic, of course.
So then the question is, if we continue pre-training the base model with all this
will the tone differ?
data, can we then access
the
tone?
Can you access your tone? Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
And tone as in for the whole brand, or is it for the specific journalist that you want to have an article written in that tone of the journalist, or what do you think?
So we have been talking about it from the brand perspective. I think the journalist's perspective would be interesting as well, but that's not in scope right now.
Yeah. Awesome.
And how does it work? So you work together with WASP. You have been part of. How did you get? If someone is curious, I mean, like, how does it work? How did you get involved, and how did you get a student to help you out? This is awesome. So how do you do that?
So actually, Lucas was working as a member of our team, but we were already involved with the research arena, the language and media.
So that's where it started.
Yeah. So they asked us for some data sets to start with, and we were able to give data to them to use for their students wanting to do experiments on Swedish media data. And that's how we got involved with the research arena. And then Lucas wanted to apply for this research position through WASP. So
was Lucas working in Bonnier before? Or?
Exactly. So he was a member of my team.
Okay. Super cool.
Super nice.
And is sitting and working mainly with you, or is he also sitting at the university and working partly? Or
he's moving between the two.
Which university is he working?
Linköping.
Linköping. Yeah. The best one.
Yeah, but there are some things that or other aspects that make this interesting, I think. So one is the possibility of hosting this LLM internally. Like, we have a lot of journalists that work on secret projects where we don't want anything to leave the building, basically. So then having like our own bespoke LLM that we can host inside of Bonnier News. And
have you started to look at this architecture then? How you want to build it on an open source, or that you fine tune, or can you talk about that?
So the starting assumption is that we will use one of the llamas and then continue pre-training the llama.
To distill out your own, so to speak, model.
Right. So, there are then questions like, because when we do the pre-training, we will not have an instruction tune model. So then the question becomes, once we have the new pre-trained model, how do we add on the instruction tuning on top of that without losing any quality of the LLM? And that's another kind of
interesting topic.
Yeah. I would say a research area.
Super important one.
Exactly.
Some of the less good ideas is to build something from scratch. I think it's much more interesting and valuable for local companies like Bonnier's if you know how to adapt it and fine tune it for your needs. Yeah. Because that's what I think more or less every company needs to do in some way.
Yeah.
And then what we have been speaking about, the big frontier versus the smaller like baby models that we will have. This is really what if we get that science right, we can get amazing engineering out in the end.
I think it's absolutely crucial for Sweden to have projects like this ongoing, right? And I also feel that we talked a little bit about this on the way over here, that like when we talk about data science as a team at Bonnier News, we usually apply data science to kind of solve a problem that is oftenly very business related, right? But sometimes, like going back to the science discussion, sometimes we kind of need to do things, take a step back and say, right, this is important for Bonnier News, but it's also important that companies like Bonnier News are doing this.
Right.
And that in that case, we really like to do that more on the academic side, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it's super important, not only for Bonnier News. I would hope that a lot, like Swedish companies that have the capability to do things like this should be doing it, right? Because otherwise we're already kind of behind.
So this is a profound topic because
not here, but
so why should we do it and why should we do it open? And it is to stay competitive or stay relevant and to build I would argue, build a critical mass of talent and engineers who has the elite know-how for this to diffuse out in society.
Yeah. I mean, in the long run, what it boils down to for Bonnier News is that we need to be like protective of a democratic society and like an open society.
Yeah.
And mostly this is through the journalistic work. But I mean, this is also an aspect of that. This is like in the line with the vision of Bonnier News too. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of other companies with similar visions and mission statements. And I think that it's important that things like this is taking place, right?
I mean, like, I don't know if you've been following the pod. So we have been following this topic on the Swedish path to language models way back. So we've had Love Börjesson here. Are you friends of Love at KB Labs?
I know who he is.
I mean, and I even used, he helped me even do my keynote at Data Innovation Summit 3-4 years ago when I was talking about economies of learning and adaptability, and use his idea. Like, he starts from a word model and then he develops many different KB models, which is adapting what is already there. Yep. And where I say, like, standing on the shoulders of giants, economies of learning, that's how you stay competitive. And then we have also had, one of the main engineers who built SWE GPT, who works in Magnus Engström's team.
Yep.
And we were sort of questioning and pushing him. Why should we build a Swedish frontier model? And should we really build it from scratch? And in the end, after the podcast, the real conclusion is, the real rationale is to learn, not that it's useful, but to learn is the useful thing. And I buy that even. But
I don't actually, because it's actually very open how you do it. So
and it's open, and
there is no new knowledge.
And this is just full circle back on when Andres is now saying that we are learning how to use a llama model, fine tuning it, adapting it, and figuring out those technicalities that we're talking about here. That is actually, to me, that statement from Anders was much bigger, because it means also, how should Sweden be competitive? What should we be doing in all this? And what should we, which path should we go? And we applaud that path. Personally, it sounds, and I applaud the path that is sort of the mini model. You said it before, even before the pod started, we're going to go to the edge model is going to be more, the Apple way will win.
Yeah, well, if there's, I don't know if it's a zero-sum game, but I mean, I think it's a good strategy to kind of, if you, was it Alan Kay? I think that Steve Jobs quoted him saying that if you're serious about your software, you should build your own hardware, right? and I think it's an Alan Kay quote, but it's used by Steve Jobs. And I think that is very true. I mean, if you have the possibility to develop hardware and you're great at software, as obviously Apple is, right? In that case, it only makes sense to kind of try to see how far you can push the envelope of, like, putting
the model in the hardware.
Right.
Wouldn't it be super ironic if actually Apple turned out to be the best one to find value from AI when they have been the worst to use AI, even to this day?
That's the case I'm making. I think that we're a little bit, we're kind of rushing to judge. Exactly. It might turn out. The same thing with Meta as well. I think that
and Meta, but they but they have a decent.
Are you saying that Bonnier News will move into hardware?
Yes.
You know, you saw his. I saw. Now I saw your ambition. I saw your real ambition.
Right.
No, but it's a great topic, right? But it's
basically, of course, Bonnier is already in the hardware business. Like we print our print our articles on papers, and then we deliver.
Hardware.
Yeah,
that's hardware.
That's UX.
Let's try to capture at least one or two topics before we close, if that's okay.
And also, I should flag that I'm sort of running out of time.
Yes,
so
I know.
So if you just take the hard topics, like from 10 minutes from now, then Hans will be happily answering those.
Let's try to end in 10 minutes if that's okay. So you will have to be able to catch your train and whatnot. And perhaps actually moving to you a bit, Magnus. And
I think I've taken up a lot of airtime in this podcast, but you kind of provoked me into it also, I must say.
So, yeah, fine. Blame it on me. It's good. Okay, but just thinking about, actually value capture from AI in general, and thinking a bit about, a lot of companies in general are really struggling to find value from AI. They get stuck in, they build a lot of prototypes, the scientific, see, can it work or not, but don't really make a product that actually do provide value. I would like to hear a bit, perhaps, how Bonnier is approaching this. Do you have some kind of idea of really trying to see how AI can provide value in as quick way as possible?
Yeah, and it's a short answer that will lead to a longer discussion. But the answer is that Bonnier News doesn't do AI projects. We don't say that let's sit down and figure out a new AI product. What we do is that we sit down and like saying that we have this process and like we have different ways of identifying when things turn into something that we should probably try to approach with AI, right? So, and that is the whole idea of like cross-competence teams and like the idea of domains and areas and trying to make sure that everything kind of flows together is just making sure that whenever someone have an innovative idea and the only way to kind of get that off the ground is by using AI, then we need to be there and identify that that's the case, right? And you can also, I mean, you could talk about being innovative and like finding new applications for AI, saying that, right, we're going to find out this complete new idea of a product and then we're going to develop it using like AI. But I would argue that it's mostly looking back, saying that we have those ideas that we couldn't do like 5 years ago because we didn't have the resources. We figured that this would be a great thing to have. Like this is a product feature that we would love to give to our users, but we don't have the resources, and it's going to take like 2 people working full time to provide the content for this functionality or whatnot, right? But it's not a new it's not a new idea. It's just that it was very resource intensive, and so we kind of scrapped it. And now 5 years later, we can kind of revisit that and say, hey, we don't need 2 people working with this anymore. We have this technology, right? So I really try to like be clear with that we don't do AI projects.
You do innovation projects, and then
not always innovation projects either. It's just.
But let's see if I can summarize what you said, and if I understood what you mean. Either you can say that we have a set of business processes today, and potentially we can see can we optimize them in different ways and find AI where it's most useful in existing processes, not for new products, right? The other thing that you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that you had thought about old ideas before that was not really feasible to do, but now potentially are. Yeah. So, but that means building a new process or product then?
Yeah, sometimes it depends on the case, right? For example, it would be great to have more relevant content exposed or shown in connection to the article the user is reading, right? But going back like 5 years, that meant that someone has to kind of sit and make those connections manually, right? Or putting metadata and some granular metadata often and build the algorithms on.
I'm trying to rush here.
Yeah, sorry,
so you
but
can fetch a train as well, because we have a final question that we'd like to capture.
That's right.
And we'll continue a bit with actually Hans later.
Yeah,
after
that sounds like a great idea.
But I think, this sounds awesome. It's actually resonates a lot with me as well. If you really want to quickly find value from AI, it's better to use the existing processes. Otherwise, it takes a super long time to change the organization.
Yeah.
Because it has inbuilt processes that is hard to change. And if you can start to optimize them, that means you can quicker find value.
Yeah. So I figured that you meant, I was thinking that you were going the opposite way. Saying, haven't you kind of rebuilt the organization to take like AI into account? And right, no, we have taken AI into account. That's why we haven't reorganized.
Yes, exactly. That's I think how everyone should think. So it's a really good approach, I think. But then, the big thing I think happens when you start to transform the processes as well. You actually start to have new processes, but that takes longer time because it means changing the way you're working. It means you have to have new things in production. It means you have new processes in place, and that is hard, right? But it potentially have a bigger impact, but it's more long term. So the best way to find value in short term is to optimize existing one, right? I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, a quick one, and then we take the AGI. I was thinking, Henrik, you can let me know.
Great. Let's leave the AGI questions to the society in the future to Hans.
Okay. Should we? I have the creativity and music thing, but we can take that with Hans later.
Sure.
And if you have to leave at 7, but perhaps then just thinking in general, coming 10 years in AI and in a media landscape in general. The progress in AI is moving in an exponential phase as usual, and a lot of things will happen. How do you see Bonnier News in 10 years? Super simple question.
Yeah. So to start off answering that, I think
paper.
Yes.
Come back to paper.
Yes. Yes. So I think that to a large extent, I think that actually this is also something that we talked about before, me and Hans. Like in the future, we're going to see more and more agents kind of sharing the same context. Right? We have multiple agents and they're going to interact in maybe the same space. So, and I think that to a large extent, I think that assistants and agents on the user side will act with more incentives. Right. Today, if you look at the operator, you give very strict instructions of exactly how to act. Right. I think that if you give it 10 years, I think that the agents will
work towards objectives.
Yes, and I think that is something that we take into account in building news products as well. So I think that the agent representing the end user is probably going to have more agency, so to speak, and be more object driven and have like stronger incentives to act one way or another, because it's a very much like a better connection between the user and the agent in terms of what the user actually prefers and wants.
So you're combining agent evolution and personalization evolution.
Yeah, but you're still going to have information need, right? You're always probably going to have information need, and that is kind of where news products come in. So you need to kind of map you have the user and you have the much more sophisticated agents in 10 years. And then you have products that like satisfy information need. And then we have to understand kind of how will those...
Matching.
Yeah.
So we will get, in all the noise, we will get the more surgical personalization in terms of with an agent, with a clear objective, helping us with the news we really want.
Yeah.
And so it means that on the production side, that it will evolve in order to have the news bits in such a way that it's completely modularized and can be fitted into different packaging for each user. And on the other side, you have the agent assistant that is objective driven to support the personalization for a consumer.
Yeah. So today, for example, if you look at an app like Spotify, you have like Spotify, I guess, is building like this model of the user, and they use that model to understand what music to recommend at what times and so on. I don't think that model will not be at Spotify. That model will be on the agent side, right? So agent will go to the Spotify who provides music, and the agent will know exactly what to search for because it will act upon whatever state the user is.
It's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought that we will have our personal agent that we will load with music objectives, news objectives, etc., etc.
Yeah. And with that,
on that bombshell,
always wanted to
You
kind of
exist all this matter.
Yeah, I always wanted to kind of stand up and leave. So this is my chance.
but that was the Top Gear, and on that bombshell.
No, I know you have to run, Magnus Engström, but thank you so much for coming here. We'll stay and continue to speak a bit with Hans a bit more.
Yeah, really nice to be here.
Yeah,
I think
we loved it. So fun.
And also, I love the arguments.
Same here.
Yeah.
Because
and I love your comment saying, and I know this is very controversial, so let's go there.
Yeah, but I mean, either we can't talk about it or we can, right?
Yeah.
So if we can, we might as well.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and yeah, don't miss your train.
Cool. With that, do you have anything to add before? I'd like to talk a bit about music with you as well.
Yeah.
Since a lot of people here is very interested in music and how AI is impacting that, and I know you are as well, Hans. But do you have anything to add? What do you think about the next decade in the media landscape and how AI will impact it? Any thoughts about that?
I think this is. I really like this idea that Magnus is presenting. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, how will this agent that Magnus is projecting? How will it talk to Bonnie News? Like, how will that business model work? Will you still buy a subscription to Bonnie News to have your agent talk to?
Yeah, the whole business model idea, that's a big question. I think how will that work in 10 years?
And I mean, you could imagine that you pay a premium to someone like Bonnie News to get this nicely packaged news information that you can trust, and then maybe you have open source that it's free. And
just to elaborate a bit about this, and I think it's super fun. And now we have spoken a bit about this, you and me, Henrik, but let's imagine that we have a future where we have, a few on super big frontier, but a large number of, small open sourced or otherwise available models that all can generate whatever news they can in different ways. I think and hope that there will be greater need for finding sources of truth and trust in the future.
Yeah,
I think and I hope that media institutions can be that kind of source of trust, so to speak, because it will be so many different news angles, and it will be so easy for anyone to produce their kind of opinionated kind of view of whatever news, that people hopefully will be very drawn to a place where someone is providing like objective journalism in some sense.
Yeah, it's even like Magnus said, you don't need to have fake news, you just need to have angled news. I mean, like we're doing it all the time. We are cutting out snippets and taking it out of context. That has been done for hundreds of years. So we don't need fake news in order to have the wrong news, so to speak, or two different truths. This is proven already. But so that also leads me down the path. And I was talking a little bit about like that. I was going in that mindset before when we were talking, but it actually fits better here. Almost like the brainstorming around product development. What are the core products? Yeah. And I think you are onto something. I think one of the core products is potentially trust. Yeah. And how do you package trust? This is what I was arguing, that we have these new types of news. And this is new products where the core product is trust, and that they are giving you a 360 view on what has been written, and they are also clear with articulating that this angle, I don't say it's wrong or right. Are you saying this is the blue angle and this is the red angle? Yeah. This is in the blue media, this is in the red media. This is in the blue community groups, and this is in the red community group. And this for me gives me as a reader a more nuanced view of the world.
it's not the place of Bonnier News
Why
to
not?
be to present the blue and the red. I think Bonnier News has to make some kind of decision. So this is how we see this event happening in the world.
Because this is a different. You're one of the news outlets, and this is essentially an aggregator. I'm discussing an aggregator product. So good. So you are a news. So you are standing for a point of view, and this is clear. But you can still have product features that are trust-centric or balance-centric. Or you can do different things that even if you have your angle, I think it brings more credibility to, even if I know you have a blue angle, but if you present other topics or related topics or other articles and clearly showing, I think there are different ways where you make Bonnier the number one choice where I go in and look first.
Yeah.
And that is also about this, I guess I would summarize it as the trust product or the trust features. I think this is going to be a big deal.
Just before we go to the next topic, if we flip the argument and just think, the most horrific way forward, it could be the case that no one can argue against the big frontier models that are so knowledgeable, that are so trustworthy potentially. I don't think that will happen, but it could be. I mean, and today when I get unsure about something, I go and ask ChatGPT or Gemini, and
not Perplexity.
Yeah, that as well.
I
like it. I know, I like it.
I actually use when it comes to questions that I want to clarify. I actually go to Perplexity first. I used to like their way of their UX.
Their UX, yes. No, but it could be the case. I mean, I'm already going there as my most trusted source in some senses.
Yeah.
Do you think that could continue, or?
But is that news?
Yeah, that's my question as well.
Is that information or news?
The first thing I did when I used Operator, or actually this new kind of task functionality, you can schedule tasks in OpenAI, is to simply say, give me once a week the top AI news. And then it gives me like the top AI news each week. And it's rather nice.
I've set up something similar. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wouldn't it be hard to beat that kind of service, you think?
But it gets the news from news outlets, right?
Yeah, maybe.
So that means also who's your customer?
Yeah.
I mean, like, so this is the value chain shifts. When are we the commodity, and who do we have in? Who's the customer?
Yeah.
This industry shifts, vastly common. And if we look back in history, 100 years, there have been major shifts like this in different industries. So I think that if we look 10 years ahead in the media landscape, I don't think you can assume that there's the same fundamental actors or value chain.
No.
I don't know. Not in 10 years.
No. Predicting anything 10 years forward is...
10 years is a long time. I think it's hard enough to do 2 years or
but
1 year.
In essence, the interesting point is that your argument fits with Magnus' argument, because essentially this is a news outlet and you are using ChatGPT as your personal agent. And you are giving your personal agent an objective function. I want AI news weekly, and it fetches it for you from whatever news outlet it can receive. So essentially you are playing out the vision of Magnus right now.
Yes,
it's no different.
No, it's true. It's true.
It's interesting. I think he's right.
Yeah.
I think so. That is interesting. Then, who's going to build the agent? Even Magnus said so.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's jump a bit in the topics here, since you have a music interest as well. I have as well, even though I'm not at all to the level that Goran and Henrik, and I'm sure you as well, Hans. But if you think about that,
we need to play some guitar after.
AI is progressing so much in generated music as well, and I've used Sono a lot and Udio, and these are really cool stuff that actually produce music that I think is enjoyable to listen to.
Yeah.
Have you tried these?
Yeah, is it called Suno?
Suno is one of them. Yeah.
I've tried that one, and I found it fascinating, I must say. It's I write mainly instrumental music, and what I tried is so you can upload your own music into the service, and then what I tried was just write lyrics that fit the melody, and then you could ask it to either continue the song or make a cover version. So that was a way of me hearing my own music with like a professional singer singing the melody, or
crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
And it's not that much work even.
No, it doesn't take a lot of work.
And it's free as well, unless you want to do too much. But
yeah. I think it's if you would use it more, it's like a, I don't know, $10 subscription.
But you who are in a position where you're trying to, I mean, like you said it yourself. I started a career as a musician, and then I figured out, it's a difficult thing to make a living. How will this change with AI in the mix? Can more people actually make a living, or even fewer make a living? What?
That's a good question.
I don't know where this is going.
No,
I can create music now. I couldn't before.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can make money from it. No.
But I mean, you have to have people who are actually interested in the artists somehow, I think. Otherwise, maybe your music will become popular as background music when you go in the department store. But if you want talking about fans, then you have to create some level of interest in the artist behind it. And the artist can use AI if it's like...
And people can use, if I want to listen to Taylor Swift or something, I can simply have AI generate music in her style.
Yeah.
Right? And what would that mean for Taylor Swift? Even though she has more money than she needs anyway, but you know,
but
most
you see,
artists do not.
But someone has we have already had this discussion a little bit. Like it's also shifting that the artists that have fans, it also becomes the whole idea to see them physically and go to the shows. And so you can also see how this is merging. You know, how you're selling tickets to the shows inside the Spotify app. You know, so yeah.
I mean, if we compare it to chess, I think it's an interesting comparison. You know, we have no chance against AI in chess, but people and humans are still playing chess against each other. Yeah. So they do appreciate like the human experience of playing chess. And I think what you're saying, you know, we already seen that, you know, what artist makes most money from these days, unless you're a super big artist, is actually the physical kind of gigs that you do, right? Yeah. And perhaps that will simply increase, and you do find value for seeing a human being doing the musical act in some way. Yeah. And that perhaps will continue simply.
I think both spectrums will exist. Yeah. And I can understand how I can enjoy an AI DJ, not only AI DJ, but an AI DJ channel on Spotify. When I go on the radio, and then I want to listen to Bob Dylan, or you know, I want to listen to and I want to go to a concert and see my favorite band.
I heard an interview with a woman who works as a digital artist, but she has physical challenges, so she can't actually paint herself, but she can generate art using image generators. And so her point was that now it's not a question of talent or technical skill, it's about taste. So she says she has fantastic taste. Everyone likes the art she generates, but she doesn't have the physical skill or the physical ability even to generate the art herself. Maybe you could see something similar happening with music.
But that can even be that can be explained as truth in music. I mean, like you have producers like Alan Rubin or someone like this weird guy in a beard who always were able to hit the taste of the time. You know, Max Martin, they have taste. I mean, like they know what's their brilliance. I mean, like they can produce music. Yeah. Many can do that, but he can actually nail the taste that sort of resonates with society. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
But in general, will it go up? Will it be easier to make money from music in the future or not?
Yes,
that's the $1 million question.
The answer is yes.
Why? Yeah. Okay.
Why? Because we are basically making too big point of this, and we have discussed this before. Yeah. This is a brush. Yeah. In the round like 2000, maybe a little bit earlier.
More than a brush.
It's a brush, right? So because I'm right now very much into EDM, electronic dance music, right? So now you have these AI tools where you can write MIDI notes, right? And then you choose a voice, and then you write the lyrics, and then you get basically a singer. You choose between different voices, right? And you have now vocal for a track, as you're saying, right? The problem is that you are limited to 4, 5, 6 voices. In the 2000, there was a program called EDJ, a beautiful program for EDM. But you had the samples, and everybody basically could produce music. They had the same samples, right? Music is about like patterns and making new things, and a little bit that sounds a little bit stranger, new voices and stuff like that. So I see this as a empowerment of a music, not actually as something that is negative. It's another brush. So now I have my AI assistant vocalist that I can actually create new music. I think new genres will be born. And then you will see basically a mixture between those things. Now we have synthetic synthetic music for a long time. We have Skrillex. We had like a rap.
Yeah.
But the background in the 80s was sampling.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about? It's just basically a
And
different level of
we have
sampling.
already seen the rise of our Swedish house mafia, Avicii, Kygo, who they're almost growing up as DJs, turning producers, and from producers all of a sudden, no, this is good music, and we want to go and see them as artists. I even went to a Swedish house mafia and Kygo concert, and of course, it's production.
You go and pay for MasterChef, you go here in Franzene, you eat. He cooks the same food as we are cooking home, but he has a taste in how it's combined.
His taste is better. So your argument is actually we are opening up the creativity for more people that has the great taste. I like that way of framing it.
But I mean, the flip side of the coin is that maybe you will flood the market. And then
to make money for it.
Yes. That could actually be worse if
That
you're
would be a
trying
lot
to
of
make
garbage.
money.
Short term.
It will be a
In
lot
the
of
short term
garbage.
for sure.
So the problem is also there's going to be a flood of garbage.
Yep. AI slush, or what's it called? AI.
We talk about this on YouTube, we talk about this on Twitter, we're talking about this everywhere.
Just before we move to the final topic here, I mean, we can also think about the question about, who is really in control. We're all assuming that the human will be in control when it comes to producing music, and then you use AI as a brush or a tool. But it could be the opposite side, saying AI is actually in control, and then using humans to produce music in some way. And that would be very
The AI
weird.
producer, the AI skivbolaget,
Yeah.
record company. Oh, why not? They're having the perfect algorithm to know what's going to sell.
They have the best taste.
And the best
taste. Could
so
be AI.
they have a scientifically optimized taste. Yeah.
Yeah, but then
Interesting.
that means that the AI needs to be in a position to decide what is important or not.
Agent.
They can make decisions.
I want you,
Dude, we are
objective
not
function,
listening to our
sell the
friends,
most
wives,
records.
families, husbands. We are not listening. How you going to listen to AI?
I listen to AI today. If I want to learn something, I use AI to do it.
Yeah,
You could be doing the same for music in the future.
Yeah, as long as it's not saying like, can you go at 2 o'clock to buy some some things for me? Then I will see how you're gonna respond to that one.
Oh, cool. It's going to be exciting future, right, Hans?
Yeah.
We can be sure about that. It's going to influence the market for music and any kind of market, I guess, in the future to such a great extent.
And do you still play a bit for fun at home?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Your hobby is live and kicking.
absolutely.
Good to hear.
Hans, do you believe that AGI will come?
Yes.
Any idea about time frame? 2 years, 5 years, 50?
Without the
15
definition.
years?
Without the definition.
Okay, let me give a definition. Then. You can also say what you want. But if you take a definition similar to Sam Altman, he basically says that AGI will happen when you have an AI system that can do tasks equally well as an average coworker. And people today, I think, don't really understand how hard that is, because AI today is basically about perception. It can't really do reasoning good. It can't take actions well. So to really being able to use operator, but in a much better say, I mean, any human is better than the operator today, for sure. So it's easy to see that we are not at that level today, and far from it, I would say. But it will be a point where, it would be, instead of asking Henrik to find a consultant that can do that, I simply will, do something and then ask an AI to do it, and they can do all the tasks, including taking actions and making decisions.
And we're talking about computer use, not like physical work.
For me, I have 3 levels of AGI. Cognitive one, without actions, is one thing. I think digital but taking action is another one. And then you can think physical one as well, and potentially a fourth with societal disruption. But let's it doesn't matter really. Let's take a physical one then. That's probably much further away. But if we take a physical one where you have humanoid robots that can do what humans can and can literally do what an average coworker can physically, not only digitally, that will come at some point as well, I guess, right? So let's take that we have that point where we can have an physical AI humanoid robot that can do tasks to the level that, like an average coworker. What would that mean? You can think of it in 2 extremes. One is the dystopian future. We literally have the Terminators of the world and the Matrix that will, be using us for their gains in a really bad way. Or a utopian one where we actually have AI that helps to cure cancer and fix the climate crisis and energy problems, and everything becomes a world of abundance where we can live for free, more or less, and pursue our creativity and passion. Where do you think we will then end up in this kind of scale and spectrum?
I have been very optimistic.
Okay.
But I am slightly worried about the development in the US currently, I must say.
Interesting.
And if we get a very powerful government that goes down a totalitarian path, and they also get access to AGI, then I think that is not the state we want to end up in, because that will not be fun, I think.
I mean, we are talking about an AI divide where we have total inequalities, where there is a very, very few who then controls something that is so much more potent or productive.
Yeah, I mean,
and the argument would then it would stay very segregated, or the power would be very concentrated to a very, very few set.
Right. I mean, reaching that point first, I guess, will be very important, because that will enable you to do a lot of things that your competitors can't. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question. Perhaps if we could spend some time on that, a lot of people saying is one, how do you call it? The one that reaches first will win everything. I have a bit hard time seeing that, actually. I think even if you have one company that develops AGI first, I think the other ones will be not that far behind, and they can still find a lot of value from a second to best model. But so for me,
but combining that AGI with the powers of a nation state, that's
of course. The abuse is horrible, of course. Yes.
So that's my current worry.
So you're more to the if you were to say like 50% in the middle, 100% positive, 0% negative, are you more on the 0 negative part?
I still lean positive, I would say.
Okay, over 50% at least. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. We had some.
How about?
I mean, one of the key arguments has resonated with me, how to answer such a speculative question, has been several guests who went away. We will have both. So we will have both abundance, and we will both have, like we have today. Yeah. We have some people who are rich, and we have some people who are not. So the problem then is how huge are these inequalities, is my kind of second thought. So the answer then has been a little bit like, okay, it's really hard to say we're going to be on 50%. It's more like we're going to be on 70 and 40 or 7. I mean, like it's going to be quite shitty, and it's going to be quite good. And the problem then is, if that quite good, is that a very, very small percentile? That is my take on it. I think we're going to have both. And we want to minimize those inequalities, that divide.
If you take my standard answer to this is basically I'm more afraid about the short-term use of stupid AI that we have today than the long-term AGI. I'm more optimistic, saying if we have truly reached AGI, we can have AI systems that control other bad AI systems. So that I think could be a good situation to come to. But today, and literally coming few years or months, we could have people, bad actors, that actually abuse AI to a large extreme. And that could be really detrimental and dangerous for our society. So I'm more afraid about short-term abuse of normal before AGI kind of situations than I am of actually having AGI. Another, really scare for me that we are seeing, I think, already today is the concentration of power that AI leads to.
Yeah.
We have already seen these kind of hyperscalers that are richer than most countries are. They have more power than most countries have.
Yeah.
Now we have a single person that has more power, I would say, that many countries have. That is very scary.
Yeah.
And I think that will continue. And that kind of concentration of power is not a good thing.
No.
And that's something I'm very afraid of as well.
Yeah, and there's a follow-on question here. We should regulate that power for that person. Where I think the optimistic way to solve the AI divide is to focus on that more and more people start using it and start moving their way up, so to speak. A little bit like Magnus was talking about how important it is that the companies that can do the research in this, they should do it open in order to get the snowballing effect around us. So I think this whole mission is to wake up the sleepwalkers. I think we are sleepwalking. I think a large part of society and leaders are, to me, sleepwalking on this topic.
Right.
And if they meant business, they wouldn't do prototyping and ending up in a prototype graveyard with an innovation theater of AI projects, but they would simply innovate process as hell.
Yeah.
And if we innovate process as hell, we would reach a productivity frontier that we need to use a lot of agents in order to further it. So I think we have not really started. 90% of us.
No. Yeah.
And people don't understand how fast the hyperscalers are moving.
No.
They are moving much faster than most companies. And then if you take Elon Musk companies, they are moving much faster than the hyperscalers.
Yeah.
And that type of increase in divide that we're seeing, it's very scary to me.
So for me, this is why we started the pod, to talk about the AI divide, to demystify it, to inspire, in order to, rather than pointing fingers at the one at the top. This is scary shit. Get your fucking act together. Yeah. Not, don't blame them for being smarter. Blame yourself for being slow. To be a little bit cynical. Yeah. Why aren't we getting into it? For real.
Well, let's try to end on a positive note. Now we went into a rabbit hole here, very negative about the future.
I get frustrated.
It could also be the case, that we actually can use AI for very positive purposes. We've seen like AlphaFold really being a super positive,
absolutely
valuable purpose. We can find, gains in curing healthcare.
The other angle, we will not solve the climate crisis. We will not solve the energy crisis. We will not solve these things without technical innovation. We need to innovate ourselves out of it. I'm so sure on it.
I'm so eager and hoping to get to AGI as soon as possible, because I think it will be a very beautiful future as long as we avoid these kind of problems.
Yeah, that's the bottom line.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you for putting us up.
Hans Hjelm, it's been a true pleasure to have you here. I hope you can stay on for a bit more discussions in the off-camera after
and
work
try
discussion.
The guitar.
And perhaps play some music. Yeah, that would be super cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.